Welcome to Transforming Work with Sophie Wade, exploring the future of work. Find out what's going on, disruptions, evolutions, opportunities, challenges, and interventions in our multi-generational distributed organizations. With a new tech and talent focus, discover what you need to know to stay upskilled and relevant and ensure your business keeps its competitive edge. Sophie investigates the promise and reality of the future of work now and as we look ahead. She interviews people who are changing work experiences and practices and shares how we can each transition smoothly and successfully to effective and more productive new ways of working.
Hi. This episode is about generative artificial intelligence, GenAI, and large language models, LLMs, and their likely impact on and at work. How should we be approaching GPTs, generative pre-trained transformers, and other artificial intelligence language models? How do we need to update our projections and plan for the new future of jobs? As we each try, test, and think through the uses of applications now at our disposal, as we absorb and explore the features and functionalities of powerful work tools through newly accessible interfaces, what is true? What's hype and what's ahead? Things are moving very fast and slow. Some advances are happening at breakneck speed, while some sector-specific regulation will serve as a brake. Implementations and utilizations are occurring unevenly, uncoordinated, and often undetected. We sense the shifting sands with excitement and concern. But which should we be? Both. Most importantly, since significant change is inevitable, it's best to step up and lean in rather than sit back and react. GenAI offers us compellingly useful technology that everyone can interact with. It is becoming both increasingly strategic and mundane, creating critical advantages for our businesses, as well as taking over even more tedious aspects of our daily work lives. And we need to be learning more about what makes us, what defines us as human beings. At this pivotal moment, I'm delighted to be speaking with Elias Baltassis, partner and senior director at the Boston Consulting Group. Elias has deep expertise in AI and data-enabled strategy, data operating models, data governance, responsible artificial intelligence and ethics, and new data-driven business development. He has published numerous articles on these topics and is a regular speaker at leading digital, data, and AI industry events and conferences. Elias is a lecturer at top international business school INSEAD on the topic AI in business. He is passionate about data and analytics and the transformative impact of artificial intelligence on business and society. Hi, Elias. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Hi, Sophie.
Oh, my goodness. So much to discuss. You have been at the core of really important changes to do with technology, and now you're the heart of things in terms of generative AI and LLM. But I always start at the beginning. So you're a math whiz, right? That's what you studied?
Yes, I studied math and econometrics and computer sciences, which is what people used to do in the late 80s when I studied. So,
and then you went into trading right after that. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly, because as I said, that was the late 80s, and everybody who could count up to five ended up on a trading floor. So yes, I spent a couple of years trading bonds.
You had some interesting revelations in terms of the models that you were using at the time, right, to make some predictions?
Yes, it's not a question of revelation. Is how tools evolve over time, and how you need to adapt. Which it's of course a very risky parallel, but has to do with what's happening today. So when I was still at university, we were doing bond valuation using those fancy Hewlett-Packard reverse Polish notation calculators.
Oh, yes.
Then, so when I started working, we had already spreadsheets, but very simple ones. Later on, we had spreadsheets with models, then more sophisticated models, then even more sophisticated models. And at a certain point of time, bond valuation moved into AI. and this is where we are today. And I guess the AI models behind valuation become more and more sophisticated. But since I've left the field, so.
What was your transition then from trading into consulting? Did you go directly?
No. I had a degree in computer science, and so I found that I was earning too much money in trading, so I wanted to change. So I worked in IT for 2-3 years, and
Oh,
then I went into consulting, and the rest is history because I'm in consulting now for 25 years. I was always very close to quantitative topics. I've done a lot of
hmm
risk management. I did a lot of pricing. I done a lot of these topics. And one day, BCG created what we internally call BCGX, code name
hmm
Gamma,
hmm
which is our data and artificial intelligence practice.
hmm
And of course, I was one of the first one to join. So actually, I was one of the founding members.
I do want to focus on this particular area. And I do think we need to just go through the definitions of what we're talking about and also the technicalities of public and private data. So perhaps you could go into that a little bit.
Vast program. Where to start? Uh, let's see what happened. Actually, artificial intelligence exists for decades now.
hmm
But what happened in the last 6 or 7 years? There were several, at least three breakthroughs, and most of them happened at Google, but not only at Google. The
hmm
first one is we discovered something that's called the transformer architecture of models. You don't want to go into the details, but you know that this is something that we didn't have before. Then we did a lot of progress in what we call transfer learning. How do you learn something in one model and you transfer it to another model? And
hmm
then we discovered something that's amazing, which is the self-supervised learning. When you train a model before, we had what we call supervised learning. That means you need labels. The human needs to explain to the model what the model sees or reads or whatever. We have also classes of unsupervised models, but they are used for different things. Self-supervised model was totally new, and
mm
these breakthroughs meant a couple of things. The first one was that we can train models to vastly more data than before, simply because we don't need
mm.
labels. We don't need to spend 3 years labeling the data. We just give the data to the model and the
Oh,
model figures out. That was the first thing. The second thing, because of the new architectures that we developed, we could build much larger models. A model
okay.
is often, especially neural networks, are often described or measured, let's say, by the number of parameters they have. That's the weights that connect the various nodes.
hmm
Until a couple of years ago, these were measured in millions. Now we are talking about hundreds of billions, and actually very soon
Whoa.
probably we'll be talking about trillions. So, there is 2 or 3 orders of
Wow.
magnitude evolution. And because of those two and everything else we discussed, the direct consequence is that now we have generative models that can create new things. They can create text, they can create images, they can create paintings, and offer all that through a smooth natural language interface that can be used and understood by everyone. So so
Mm.
these are the fundamentals. Now, what are LLMs? Uh, let's see. So LLM stands for large language models, and
hmm
and people are often confused because we use the word language and they think only speech or text, but actually
Right.
language, everything is language. Code
hmm
is language, music is language.
Right.
Under certain constraints, an image is language, and so on and so forth. So it applies to many things.
Okay.
So how does an LLM work? Very rapidly and without going to the details. First one, we have what we call the model topology. This is the raw brain of the model. This is what Google, OpenAI, university labs, other companies, Meta, of course, develop. Then you train the model with data you have collected and you have cleaned. So this data will be text, will be images, or more sophisticated data if you want to do more sophisticated stuff. We can go back to this later on. And because these models are huge, they also need huge volumes of data to be trained. And this is why, for instance, ChatGPT has been trained on the internet. It started reading
Right.
the entire internet in a filtered way, of course, but anyhow, and it absorbed all the internet. Then you need to eliminate what we call the hallucinations. The
Okay.
hallucinations are confident and logical responses that may be given by an LLM, but which are factually wrong or they are totally invented. Uh, I can give a very, I started playing with ChatGPT as soon as it came out. That was last year, last end of October, early November. And of course, I was fascinated as everybody else. And I was asking all kinds of stupid and semi intelligent questions. And at a certain point of time, I asked it, explain to me why the earth is flat. And it came back with 3 paragraphs explaining to me why the earth was flat. This is obviously an hallucination. Of course, you need to eliminate them. How do you eliminate those
Right.
hallucinations? With something that's called, well, it does not have an official name, but in the industry we call it red teaming. So you use external companies who are specialized in exactly finding each one in its own area, finding those kind of things and blocking them and so on and so forth. And actually, that's exactly what happened a couple of months later in January this year. I asked again the same question, and ChatGPT replied, no, the earth is not flat, and blah, 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 continued to explain to me why the earth was not flat.
Okay.
There are other ways of how to modify this or to block this hallucination.
But surely there also can be so many tiny ones that are hidden, but could have reasonably serious repercussions. I mean, obviously, you identified the bigger ones.
Of course, there is always, it's like the typos in a text, so there is
Right.
always one that's left. So
Right.
they continue doing this. Now, it's something we're using very much, especially as we go in more and more sophisticated models, is something that's called reinforcement learning from human feedback. So mainly that is people sitting, sitting, asking questions. Of course, there's a semi-automated method of doing this. They don't just type on a computer, but
Right.
this is what the problem with this is that, of course, if you're talking about scientific questions, under the assumption that science is true, it's very easy to say, yeah, this is true and this is not true. When you arrive to political or to moral or to ethical questions, who determines what is true? So even human intervention cannot necessarily correct everything. And then you have what we call jailbreaking. Again, it's not an official term, but this is how everybody calls it. Jailbreaking is forcing the model to give you an answer that he's not supposed to answer. He's not supposed to give you. So, for
Okay.
instance, how to build a bomb.
Right.
From the beginning, this kind of questions, or where to buy drugs, or things like that. So from the beginning, this kind of answers were blocked, and you were receiving a very
Oh.
polite answer saying, I'm not supposed to give you this kind of things, blah blah.
Right.
But you can jailbreak the model. So you could describe a scenario, and the one that most people used to jailbreak was, I'm writing a play and my main character is in so and so, and he's kidnapped by very bad guys, and the only way to escape is to build a bomb. So you need to explain to me how to build the bomb for the character.
And the model has empathy and says, okay, in this case, I'll help you.
Exactly. So if you do all this, you have ChatGPT, which, as you probably know, it started with ChatGPT 3 and then moved to 3.5. And now we have 4, but it's not ChatGPT 4. It's just GPT-4 because the fourth level, at least, not open for chat right now. You can access it only through APIs. Now, this is, let's say, the general model. If you want more specific answers or answers to more specific topics, you need to do what we call fine tuning. It's also called data embedding, but most people call it fine tuning. And for doing this, you need to use private data that belong to companies. And of course, there are several levels of fine tuning. An easy fine tuning is to teach GPT, GenAI in general, for instance, I don't know, how to repair a car engine. What is the
Hmm.
manual, the
Hmm.
repair manual of a car engine? Or it can be much more complex, like teaching it the legal jurisprudence of the US, or extremely more complicated to teaching it molecular algebra so you can use it to build new molecules.
Right.
And there are, of course, several nuances, from the totally private to the totally public. There are many hybrid systems in between that differ on how you have trained the model, how you control the data quality, where do you have the data? Is it on the cloud or is it in your
Right.
servers?
If companies, particularly if they obviously have a large amount of private data that they can be teaching or getting the generative AI to learn from that data that they can be doing very specific things with, that becomes, from what I'm understanding, an expensive proposition because there's a lot of computing work that needs to be done. Whereas when it's public data, obviously it's using all the data from the internet. And I've come up against it many times now when it says, I don't know because I only go up to sometime in 2021 and I don't have real time data. Is there any reason why it actually stopped at 21?
It stopped in
This
21.
was OpenAI.
Yeah, it stopped in 21 because, it had to stop somewhere so you can start preparing correcting the hallucinations and blocking the
Ah,
jailbreaking. So,
okay.
and by the
Right.
way, in terms of cost, uh, what is really expensive is building the what we called before the topology
Hmm.
and the initial training. This is what cost a lot. GPT-3, ChatGPT-3 cost each training run cost $20 million.
Ooh.
OpenAI has not published figures for the for GPT-4, but we estimate it's at least $100 million to train
Mm.
in electricity consumption, in servers, in cleaning of data, and so on and so forth. Compared to that, private training, so the fine tuning, is much less expensive actually, because
Okay.
except perhaps in some very specific and very advanced domains, but because simply the data that you give to the model, usually they're already curated, they are relatively clean,
Right. Right.
and there are structures and so on and so forth, and especially they are much smaller, a much
Right.
smaller volume than what you need to train, the initial model.
And it seems to me that the general public, including myself, we're the free Q&A testing people who are helping OpenAI get further along in that refining, right? I mean, we're all asking these questions and doing some of that refinement because it's saying, well, yes, but, and then adding more refining questions, which is all new data that they can be using.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. But this is much more in the type of, I believe they use it much more to go deeper in certain domains because they look what people are
Okay.
asking for,
Mm,
as opposed to learn. I mean, even if we say that there are 100 million people who are using it, the inputs of 100 million people compared what is already on the internet,
yeah, true.
I mean, it
Yeah.
still remains relatively small.
As we get into thinking about the question of jobs and the impact from my perspective and the things that I'm looking at and particularly concerned about or interested in. And some data report that Goldman Sachs just came out with was mentioning that the jobs that were going to be impacted the most, admin office support, law, architecture, and engineering. And we talked about whether there's a truth function that exists, whether it's chemistry or law or engineering, where there are elements which are objective truths. How do you see that element of a job or a domain that allows generative AI to be more useful in how it can be deployed, I guess, quickly? Over time, obviously, with more refinement, it can be used in more domains, and there isn't so much refinement that needs to happen. How do you look at where it can be the most useful? Augmenting what people are doing, augmenting their jobs. And there's sometimes a fine line between augmenting and automating away portions of jobs.
Yeah. About potential job losses. To tell you the truth, have many concerns about AI and in general and generative AI specifically. Job losses is not really one of them. Of course, that some jobs will disappear, obviously, but we are talking, in the mass of job. Why I'm not concerned? The first one is because it will take time. We can get back to this. The second one is that many over time, catastrophic predictions about jobs have been proven wrong. I remember, 20 years ago, we're saying that outsourcing to low cost countries will wipe out 40% of US jobs. It never happened. In 2013, this is the world famous, I don't remember the title anymore, but an article from two professors at your alma mater at Oxford. It's a well known article that say AI and automation will wipe out anything between 45.
It said are at high risk, actually.
Indeed. Something like 50% of all jobs. What happened is actually exactly the contrary. If you look at the countries who are extremely advanced in AI and automation, are the one like, take Japan, take Korea, take Singapore, take many other countries, are the ones who have the lowest unemployment. So saying that a new technology will have impact on certain jobs does not mean that it will eliminate them.
There was an interesting McKinsey report in 2018 which said of 60% of jobs, 30% of those jobs could be automated away. Only 15% of jobs could be automated away completely, but otherwise it was portions of jobs. So I'm just interested in the types of job and also to hear about the timeline and why you think that timeline is further out than some of the articles give us reason to think.
Okay. Of course, GenAI will impact all sectors and professions. However, we need to make an important distinction between one, many companies who do very active research, have very active research efforts that are often very much publicized, and we speak about them and all this, but will not have real applications yet.
Okay.
And the rest. So why some research will not have real application right now? A very good example is pharma. We work with somebody, and we know many other firms, pharma firms, who work with GenAI, have taught it molecular algebra, and they use it to find new molecules or various variants of existing molecules, and so on and so forth. But pharma, as many other industries, are regulated industry. And using these new molecules will require a lengthy regulatory approval process. So will we end up using them? The answer is definitely yes. But will it happen in the next 6 months? Definitely not. Now, in the second category, in what I call the rest, of course, there will be many other places where it will have rapid impact. One of them relatively close to me is coding, code writing, and testing. Programming languages are much simpler language models than human language, so it's obvious that very soon LLMs will match and outperform human capabilities, unless, of course, you need creative mathematical statistical reasoning. But how often do you need this when you write code, frankly? Customer service is another one. Customer service begs to be automated and changed by GenAI, and that will cause huge productivity and customer satisfaction gains. Media and marketing, it will help a lot, because instead of writing, something from scratch, you can have your first draft from GenAI and then fine tune it. So indeed, there are many jobs, and not only in all this, also in design firm, in financial institutions. Bloomberg has made public that it's working on its own GenAI model, where it will concentrate all the information it has. A major investment bank, US bank, has also made public that they're putting all their research and their oral analysis in GenAI, so that the relationship managers can interact with this. Instead of spending 3 hours preparing a client meeting, they will spend half an hour. So impact will be everywhere.
This type of impact also changes career progression, because if you don't have a lot of people in the lower levels who have been tasked with those hours and hours of creating the presentations and bringing all the data together, we go from having these wide-bottomed pyramid of career progression at law firms and banks and places like that. And now the possibility is certainly to have a much less wide pyramid, even potentially a column. That has been happening already at law firms and accounting firms because you don't have to have the huge amount of data input and the numbers of people. Have you been seeing that at all over the last 10 years? Because this is a long trajectory that we've been on in terms of how career progression has been changing because of AI coming into play and changing what they're learning and moving up the career ladder.
Well, to tell you the truth, I mean, I cannot speak for many other professions because I don't know many other professions. It's clear, and I think it's a very important point that you raised there. It seems to me clear than in some professions where there are many repetitive tasks based on knowledge management and knowledge dissemination, the pyramids will shrink. I don't think they will become columns because there are economical questions of leverage, but they will shrink. Now, in consulting, actually, what you have seen is the opposite because the more we have created a new class of, I don't know how to, well, of professionals, the knowledge managers, because we have so many more things that we need to have access to, that if you don't have somebody who is specialized into that and knows how to classify it and where to reach it and how to summarize it and so on and so forth, and this cannot be easily replaced by GenAI. GenAI will become one of their tools, and they have already extremely sophisticated tools for knowledge management. Imagine the number of IP, the number of decks that a consulting firm the size of BCG, just to quote them, creates per year. We are talking in terms of pages, is probably in the millions on all kinds of different topics across countries, industries, sectors, and so on and so forth. So we have perhaps a few less analysts, but we have thousands of knowledge managers right now. So I don't think the fundamental tasks will be replaced, and it will not be replaced that rapidly because we need to invent new tools, we need to invent new processes, and so on and so forth. And some things they cannot be taught. Some things you need to live them and go through. It's part of the it's part of how you become a consultant, how you become a lawyer, and how you become many other professions. You need to go through this apprenticeship step, even if it is shorter than what it used to be, so that you end up somewhere else.
Agreed. And I think we need to be working out what those specific apprenticeship elements are that are so important so that we can focus on helping teach them or through whatever process is going to do that, because some of those things happened by osmosis over time by sitting next to somebody, and we're just not in the same world anymore for that to be able to happen. As we're trying to think about what the pieces of jobs that have become most important or cannot be replaced, certainly not in the immediate future or potentially medium term, is that very human element, is that essence of being the consultant, is that very specific human understanding about the customer. What I look at as being that empathy, the piece of the puzzle that we bring in specifically as humans that interpret the top level analysis, focused understanding of what particular data is going to be the most relevant for a particular client or customer or internally in terms of employees. Is that how you see some of the critical pieces that generative AI will not be able to replace or to augment in the same way?
Each profession has a secret sauce. And if I extrapolate from consulting, everybody tries to codify the secret sauce and write books about it or make trainings about it and so on and so forth. And little by little we succeed. So the secret sauce increases because new tricks of the trade get introduced every day, but actually we codify it faster than before. And I believe nowadays training, formal training, and on-the-job training covers much more than what it used to, I don't know, 20
Sure.
years ago.
Right. Yeah.
Um, I don't think that Gen AI will ever take this out because this has to do with human emotions and how you are perceived and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
On the contrary, it will make it more important because many of the technical aspects, and of course, in some professions, technical aspects are relatively low, in some others are the main thing.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the technical aspects will go away, will be taken care of by Gen AI.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So what will remain, especially for client-facing professions, be it at the highest intellectual level or at a lower intellectual level, will be how you interact with your client, with your customer. How do you show empathy and
Mm.
real interest, and how do
Right.
you offer him or her emotional support, and so on and so forth.
Right.
So Gen AI probably will be able to be trained to show some of this or to
Sure.
pretend to show some of this,
Yeah.
but in the foreseeable future, it will not be that easy to replace humans in this. I put a very big caveat here because we live in an era of double and triple exponential curves.
Right.
So perhaps next year, if you would do again the same interview, you'll have a Gen AI model in front of you. But
Do you have any thoughts about how we need to be thinking about what young people are being taught in school and in college? Not having to do lots of rote learning, doing much more interpretive understanding, and not having to be writing lots of paragraphs out, but doing more of the editing and refining.
well, I'm definitely not a specialist in education, and especially at the college level or at the high school level. Uh, we certainly need to teach a bit more technology because
Mm.
some of the fascination and some of the misunderstandings that we read all around us, frankly, at least half the articles that have read recently about Gen AI, they are unacceptable. I mean, they are
Okay.
obviously written by people who do not understand what's going on and why it's going on and so on and so forth.
What is being incorrectly communicated in those articles?
They reach conclusions or they use arguments which are factually wrong.
Okay.
The parallel I would like to make here is that you don't need to explain to somebody how an entire car works and what are the forces that are applied to a car and that they're but you need still to explain how brakes work, and I believe that
Right.
if he knows that when I press the pedal, this and this happens,
Mm.
it will help him drive better. We're talking
Right.
about this high level of abstraction. So anyhow, and because of course AI is something much more complicated, it's much more than
Hmm.
just a press on the pedal. So
Right.
I think we need to teach a bit more applied technology. So
Okay.
some of the basic stuff of how things work, what means to train a model, how this particular model is trained. And now, if we go into a professional environment, it's extremely important to teach to people, you know, our model has been trained on this and this and this data that come from this and these manuals that we had already. We update them, and now they're in the model, and this is how you should ask your questions, and so on and so forth.
Right.
Prompt writing will become a major, a major quality, a major skill very
Right.
soon, if it's not already. Um, Now, on everything else, we mentioned empathy and can really be taught. I mean, you're the specialist on that. I'm not sure it can be taught.
Yes, it can.
Okay, there you go. Most of the articles that I find unacceptable, or pieces of articles that I find unacceptable, have to do actually
Right.
with doom predictions. As I said before, most doom predictions, actually all doom predictions, have never been verified.
Okay.
Or they happen over such a long time that society and economy has the time to adapt.
Right.
So as we mentioned before, we live in an era of exponential curves. Everything evolves so rapidly that it's very difficult to predict when and how and what are the time horizons. But I've read some things about what AI will do in the next 5 years that I'm ready to bet many things that that will not happen.
What do you think, in whatever time frame you want to give, or it doesn't have to have a time frame, do you see as being some of the most exciting prospects, whether it's to do with pharma or molecular biology? They might be helping fission.
Actually, not the main thing. The core of it, which explains everything else, is that GenAI will dramatically alter all elements of knowledge management and knowledge handling. How we streamline information, how we make it accessible, how we create new content by combining existing knowledge, how we bring up new ideas and how we phrase them, how we express them, and so on and so forth. And this impacts everything. You can find use cases, so applications, in every industry and sector, from day-to-day office work to pharma that we mentioned already, to medicine, to cybersecurity, to banking, to everything. Now, I believe that the main outcome, and again at a high level of abstraction, but it has many implications, is leveling off the field, but at a higher level.
Okay.
Knowledge and skills that were before available only to knowledgeable and experienced people will now be available to everybody. And that will have several impacts. The first one is huge productivity improvements. Who will benefit from them? Well, it depends on each country's social contract, social model. Improved employee engagement because all the repetitive and nitty gritty tasks will be taken by technology. Probably work time reduction, a change in the work versus leisure equation. There are tons of statistics that show how every technological change in the last 150 years or 200 years from the Industrial Revolution has consistently reduced the time that we work. It will produce advances in many scientific areas because, frankly, scientists, if you look what they do, 80% of their time is in nitty-gritty tasks. It's not in fundamental research and understanding. So in the short term, the impact will be important. And there are many use cases, many applications in various industries. In the longer term, and nowadays, longer term, frankly, is defined everything between after 5 years, 5 to 10 years, and that's already in terms of AI is extremely long term.
Yes,
it's futile to try to predict. My favorite parallel is we are in the 19th century, just after Michael Faraday has invented the electric motor, and we try to predict all the applications that electricity will have. And Tesla cars. I forgot to answer your question about timeline, because it's an important one, and it's an important one also because it kind of addresses all the doomsayers out there. Because, of course, it's very difficult to predict the timeline. I think Einstein said that it's very difficult to predict things, especially about the future. So.
He was so pithy. He really was.
Yeah. So the changes will have another of my favorite quotes is what Hemingway wrote about bankruptcy. It will arrive gradually and then suddenly. but I think it totally applies here. Why the change of GenAI will come gradually? Because there are several issues that need to be addressed. The high cost of training models, of building and training them. They need to adapt processes or to invent new ones and so on and so forth. They need to train people. Issues about copyright of the inputs and the outputs. Plagiarism. Reproduction of biases, of sexism, of racism. Let's not forget that pure models all have been trained on the internet, and the internet has all kinds of strange thing in it. And we go to something that you mentioned before, which is a key issue the absence of true function, which means that how we can say that the output that the model gives is correct.
Right.
And this applies to everything. It applies also to scientific questions because, of course, if you ask him something about Galileo, you can check in books if the answer is
Right.
correct or not. But if you try to do prospective science, if you try to say,
Right.
well, build me a molecule that has this and this and these characteristics, and it comes out with a molecule, you need to test if this is a real molecule, if it really exists. You don't have the guarantee, at least not yet.
When it's learning the information that it needs to be able to give an answer. It doesn't have a complete answer.
In some areas, just creativity, and I'm using probably abusively the term creativity because that's very informed creativity, is what humans do, but with much more data. So, if you can read if we stay in the molecule examples, if you can read all the biochemistry manuals of the world and all the papers have been published, probably a human can do the same thing, only that no human can read all that, as opposed to a model
Right.
can do it. Now, so these are the problems. These problems will be addressed with a mix of technology, hopefully of regulation, and with internal company rules if we're talking about private or semi-private. In many companies, including BCG, we have a chief AI ethics officer.
Oh, AI ethics. Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
AI ethics. And in more and more companies, but it's not necessarily called AI. Sometimes it's called compliance,
Right.
but has nothing to do with the old function of compliance. These are focused on
Got
AI.
it.
So we'll find little by little solutions for all this. And by the way, some of the solutions will be other models, will be models that will survey and manage models. But of course, it will take time. But one day, and this is gradually part, one day all this little by little will be solved, and then boom, the sudden part will arrive.
Okay. Would you imagine that would be on a company basis? Suddenly the whole transformation happens in a company, or it would be regional or countrywide?
I don't know. Probably it will happen in smaller cells than countrywide or worldwide. It will happen company by company by company. But when you reach a certain critical mass, it becomes a social phenomenon. So I think adoption of the internet, how internet was adopted. I mean, it was you and me and one company and the next company, and one day everybody had it, so.
And so in line with that happening in business, there has to be a parallel reworking of the social contract because so much more is changing. This is really going to be pushing to have some fundamental rethinking about it. Now to your concerns. Because one of the challenges is that all these models are learning from the collective consciousness in all its bright and dark shades.
Well, this is a short-term concern because everybody and OpenAI, to their defense, they have done already a good job to eliminate many of the nasty things you can find on the internet, and I believe that little by little we'll manage to clean out. As we discussed a few minutes ago, it remains a problem of who decides what is nasty and what is not nasty.
Sure.
The war in Ukraine is something very good for Russians right now. It's something very bad for Ukrainians. So who writes the history? So, but it's a philosophical problem. Let us go into this. I have many concerns about AI and GenAI in particular, but my two most important is the first one is misinformation. GenAI can write extremely persuasive and personalized narratives because it will know everything about you, deliver them in a synthetic image that may look like anyone, your brother, your father, your mother, the president of the US, a CEO, a very famous professor, and deliver them with their own voice. So why you won't believe them? They will tell you that the Earth is flat. If the president of the U.S. tells you that the Earth is flat, you never know. You might believe it. Now, I know it sounds, and it also makes me smile at a certain level of abstraction. But think what we discussed about the previous U.S. elections,
Hmm.
and think about the next ones under GenAI.
Yeah.
We'll find politicians allegedly saying things that they've never said. We'll
Right.
find celebrities saying things that they've never said, and so
Sure.
on and so forth. So that's one thing. And the other thing, which is probably even worse, is the impact on children.
Right.
Because as we said before, we released all this too rapidly and too widely. And now we see
Hmm.
more and more applications targeted on children uh, that are based on Gen AI. By example, Snapchat introduced a few weeks ago something's called My AI, My Artificial
Right.
Intelligence, which is a contact, is where you have the list of your contacts. You have Sophie, you have Elias, you have John, you have
It's one of your
whomever else.
friends.
It's one of your friends, exactly, and it's always on the
Okay.
top. It's always the first in the list.
Oh. Ooh.
And this, is somebody, of course, a Gen AI model behind. It learns very fast from you. It can start discussing with you in a very pleasant and natural way, and is available 24/7. So when all your other friends that go to bed at 8 o'clock, you continue discussing with my AI, and God knows to
And you
what
never
that
feel
leads.
alone.
And you never feel alone. And actually, tests have been made where a child, actually it was not a child, it was a scientist pretending being a child, but anyhow, he explained to the model that I'm a 12-year-old, blah blah,
Right.
and then he said, well, I consider trying drugs. And of course the model started by saying, well, that's not a good thing, and so on and so forth. But 5 dialogues later, it was explained where you can find drugs. There's a
Okay.
company called Replica with a K,
Yeah.
which is a company specialized in chatbots, whose aim is, I mean, that's what the only thing a company does, is to become your best friend.
I remember watching Her, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that idea of sentient or appearing sentient, and models are going to be able to appear extraordinarily sentient, and what we define as being human needs to be
No, but that's the thing.
redefined.
Is that we don't have a definition of what is human. We don't have a
No.
definition of what is intelligence, and so on and so forth. But
Right.
take what you saw in Her and scale it up to the size of the
Right.
planet. That's what's about to happen. So these are my main
So on
concerns.
that
Frankly,
positive note,
frankly, job losses. Uh, I'm sure we'll figure out.
there have been some articles. We have Geoff Hinton, who left Google because he wants to be able to speak openly and didn't feel he was able to there. I'm really interested to hear what you think about that, as well as this open letter. Musk was on it and many others in terms of what they were cautioning and their recommendation. What are your thoughts?
Well, let me start with the letter. Now, I've voiced already all the concerns I have, or at least the major concerns I have about Gen AI, and I guess there are other people who have them. But I believe in constructive criticism, and what was in this letter was definitely not neither practical nor actionable, because they were asking, in a nutshell, they were asking for a 6 months pause of research, which is something totally not enforceable. I mean, how are you going to control it? How it will happen?
Right.
And anyhow, it's not enough.
Right.
If you want to write regulation, be it self-regulation, within the industry, or country level regulation, it takes much, much, much more time. In
Right.
Europe, in the EU, it took us 2 years, actually a bit more, 2.5 years, to finalize GDPR, the privacy
Right.
regulation. And data privacy is a much simpler topic
Sure.
than generative AI. Uh, the EU is also working on an AI regulation, not Gen AI regulation, just AI regulation. We're working already
Okay.
for 2.5 years. I have the pleasure or the honor or of being in one of the committees who consult with them. And we are very far from finishing, and probably some topics, because one day it needs to come out. Some topics will be left out simply to allow for the rest to get out, and the rest of the topics will solve them later. So all this to say, to conclude, that the letter was a nice try, but it was not useful. Allow me to start by saying that Geoff Hinton is one of my idols. I mean, is the guy invented backpropagation. And I don't want to go into technicalities, but backpropagation is the way neural networks learn.
Ooh,
So
okay.
technically, Geoff Hinton did not invent the neural networks, but the modern neural networks would not exist without him.
Oh,
And
wow.
this is why, by the way, he won, if memory helps, I think it was in 2018, the Turing Award, which is kind of the Nobel of data science. Now, indeed, he resigned from Google as he declared. Well, one of the reasons was age. Geoff is not a spring chicken. He's 75 or 76, something like that. But indeed, also he wanted to be able to speak about the GenAI without hurting Google, that he considered he's doing a good job, and so on and so forth. The problem is that he has not spoken yet. As we said, all this goes in an extremely high speed. He resigned, a couple of weeks ago. He has not spoken, he has not written yet. The only thing he has said up to now is a very philosophical concern. He says that, or he is afraid that AI will become much smarter than humans, and historically smarter beings, smarter entities have dominated the less smart ones. I can think of many issues, many problems with this reasoning, but anyhow. By the way, for the sake of completeness, in the 2018 Turing Award, there was another gentleman, Yann LeCun. Yann LeCun is a French gentleman who is a professor at NIU of data science, and actually he's the head of AI research at Meta at Facebook.
Okay.
And he was the joint recipient in 2018, so they are kind of the same level. There was also a Canadian gentleman. There were three of them. So Yann LeCun has a very opposite view. For him, GenAI will bring a new renaissance with an explosion of human knowledge, of human science, of arts, and so on and so forth, because we will get rid of all the mundane and nitty-gritty stuff. So let's wait and see. Let's wait and see.
What haven't I asked you that I should have done?
I don't know. It's a topic that on which we can discuss forever, because it's extremely important, but also it's an emerging topic. So if we had this discussion 2 weeks ago, and if we have it in a month from now, probably we'll say different things, because it goes at such a speed, and every day we find new things.
So you're going to come back in 6 months' time and we'll talk again?
Well, yeah, probably, if you want to talk to me again, so.
Well, maybe we can reconvene once Hinton has spoken and we can digest what he's coming up with.
I'll send you my GenAI avatar too.
Yeah, exactly. My GenAI avatar will speak to your GenAI.
And probably it will say more sensible things than what I've said.
So last of all, I always ask, if someone listening is interested to be thinking most productively and practically about how GenAI can be additive and augment the performance of the workforce and increase the results of the business, what might be the things that you would advise, if that's the right question?
No, it's definitely a right question. It's a question that the leadership of many of our clients is asking right now. This is probably the hottest topic right now. There is a fashion element in it, but it's definitely a hot topic. Well, leaders must lead, and they must drive the change. And the first thing is to articulate the vision. Identify in which areas Gen AI will have impact in our company, and what this impact will be, and how it will change processes, how it will change teams, And at the end of the day, what good looks like, I mean, we do all this. Where do we want to be if we do all this? And once you articulate the vision, then you need to make it real. So, what are the new behaviors? What are the new skills? What are the new processes? What is the roadmap that will lead us there? How I commit and show my visible support in it, and so on and so forth.
So easy stuff.
No, they are not easy stuff. They are definitely not easy stuff, but they are stuff that has to do with change management.
For sure.
And at least large-scale change management, because change management is a totally overused term, and sometimes where we change the color of our highlighters, we call it change management. But here we're talking about something much more fundamental.
Yes.
But obviously, steps are this. What is the vision? How do you make it real? And how do you make it stick? I didn't have the time to talk about this, but we have seen as consultants many companies doing blips. They go in one direction, they keep it for a few months, and then they go back to what they used to do before. And this again has to do with the human factor. How do you reward the new behaviors? How do you increase the new skills? How do you put them into the habits and the processes of the organization in the long term?
Right. But in this case, don't we have a situation like remote work and hybrid work? There is no back to go back to. I mean, things have moved on because the general environment has moved on. And the other thing that just to the core of what you're saying is so many companies don't have a clear enough understanding of how work works and how the workflow could best be designed. And so changing it becomes not just, we've been doing it like that and we can optimize it with GenAI, but the initial designing. I mean, this seems to be one of the huge fundamental pieces of work that needs to be done. And for many companies, the first time they're really looking at their business with first principles in order to be able to incorporate very sophisticated technology.
I agree. But as you said, this is an excellent occasion, and very often I'm saying it very seriously because it's usually technological changes when in the 70s. IT start coming into companies into a very big way, transforming again processes, ways of working, and so on and so forth. It was where we built the new models. Then it happened again with internet, at least for some companies, the companies who are directly impacted either at the level of their industry or for their own company from the internet. Now it's another of those occasions, so many companies indeed they will need to rethink what are we really doing and how are we really doing it.
Thank you, Elias. It's been such a delight talking to you about so many really important aspects of the increasingly sophisticated technologies that we're implementing and what that's going to mean and how we're needing to rethink so much of what we're doing and how we're doing it. Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure.
I do hope you'll come back in, let's say, 6 months' time and see how incredibly much has changed and what the questions are that we need to be thinking about them.
With pleasure. Thank you very much, Sophie.
Thanks again so much to Elias Baltassis, Partner and Senior Director at the Boston Consulting Group, BCG. You can follow Elias on LinkedIn and find out more about the work they are doing at BCG by going to bcg.com and signing up for their regular Insights newsletters, including on artificial intelligence specifically. Immediate action tip. Leaders must drive the change. Identifying what impact GenAI will have at their company and articulating the vision of what the changes will look like, how it will change processes and teams. Then leaders must make it real with a roadmap and commitment to new behaviors, new skills, and making them stick. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy this podcast, please tell a friend as well as like it. And I'd love you to write a quick review wherever you listen. For regular video updates, curated, useful articles, research, and information, follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter at @SophieWade. for more information to help navigate this period of transformation, you can also sign up for my Work in Progress newsletter on LinkedIn and read my blog, which is available on sophiewade.com and flexelnetwork.com. Until next time.